You are listening to Ordinary Eccentrics. I'm Courtney Lofton, and together we'll uncover the extraordinary lives of ordinary people. Let's hop into it. Okay, hello.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, this is really just a conversation. I do know you a bit from our coaching relationship, but I'm happy to kind of put that aside so we can start from scratch and share your story with all of the listeners. So I will have you start by just introducing yourself first and last name.
So I am Vanessa Redford, all the way,
And
just me.
and, and Vanessa, where were you born and raised?
Oh, Washington State, up very, very far north, very close to the Canadian border. I could see Victoria, BC on a clear day.
Wow. Was it like a pretty rural place?
Mm, well, not really. I grew up at my grandparents', which was my happy place. It
Oh.
was on the Fidalgo Island. We had a little farm, so we had cows and horses and ponies and chickens and goats and all kinds of stuff. And then my folks lived on the mainland side, so I would say it was
Mm.
very townish, and then it became city.
Mm-hmm. What was life like for you growing up northern Oregon?
And yeah, North
Northern
Washington.
Washington. I get it wrong every time. Every time someone says they're from Washington or Oregon, I say the other place. So,
It's
what was it
almost
like?
the same. Let's see. Very oh, what would be a nice way to describe that? It was, let me say, as I grew up and started traveling, it was kind of a culture shock
Mm,
because it was not very welcoming even to people that lived there. They just a lot of judgments, a lot of I think maybe sadness, and people were just really attached to an old way of doing things. I grew up
mm-hmm,
around a lot of older people,
mm-hmm,
and so I think that, there's a lot of that reminiscing as well. So a lot of folks that grew up during the Great Depression, and lots of very closed minds about the world in general. So it was like, don't go out there to the big bad world, stay here where it's
mm-hmm.
safe. I'm like, I don't know about that.
A lot
It
of
might
like
be safe
fear-based.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was school like for you? Did you go to school with a lot of other children, or was it pretty small classrooms?
So the early years were spent homeschooling, and my mom had some pretty opinionated ideas about the way that public school indoctrinates you.
Mm-hmm,
And she had kind of gotten herself into this cult that many people had at the time, and I know that she was doing her best to try to protect us. Eventually, I did talk her and dad into letting me go to high school, and I'm very grateful that
mm-hmm,
I had that experience. That was eye-opening in and of itself, because I realized that it really wasn't better on the other side, that I wasn't gonna learn more. I learned from different
mm-hmm.
people, and so I appreciated that. I just couldn't wait to get done with school, and so I told my mom, I said, "Hey, when it comes to the level that they're teaching at, I'm above that.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you say
Okay.
about me cramming the last 3 years of high school, and then I'll go and I'll get my GED, and then you won't have to worry about teaching me anymore." So I graduated. I was actually done with my studies at 15, and
Wow.
I graduated just after my 16th birthday.
So you were a high school graduate at 15. You're already way above your classmates.
Mhm.
So was high school not really what you were expecting, kind of like typical American high school?
Yeah, gosh, nobody was serious. And that was, I was like, we're here to learn. We're gonna change the world
Yeah.
and these great, amazing ideas that I had about going to school. um, I guess I was very businesslike. My mom said that
Mm.
I didn't laugh a whole lot as a kid. I was quite serious about stuff.
Mm.
I guess that's why I found myself in the accounting field. So,
Mm.
and I laugh a lot now. I think it's a coping mechanism though, more than
Yeah.
anything. So, yeah, it's
I'm
interesting.
curious about the cult education and what that was like.
Oh my gosh, yes. Even I don't think that adults realize that kids are a lot wiser than they give us credit for.
Mhm.
And we can tell when something isn't healthy and when it isn't the whole story and when we're only being fed half of a truth.
Mhm.
And it was very frustrating. Anytime I would question, is this really how it felt for the Native Americans on Thanksgiving? I mean, are you really? I just find this really hard to believe because just there was so much stuff that I remember not being able to really buy into, and
Mhm.
there was no room for me to question any of that. This was all biblical. This is all coming from people who are biblically based. So therefore, it had to be 100% accurate because those people would never lie, all of those kinds of things. So a lot of brainwashing was
Mhm.
attempted. And eventually, as a kid, I just got tired of getting in trouble all the time for questioning stuff. So I just got very quiet and internalized a lot of what was going on. And it's kind of sad because I think it was right about that time, maybe 8 or 9, 10, maybe, that I really lost my voice. So what did come out was the extreme, when I finally had hit the ceiling and I couldn't take it anymore
Mhm.
and I would react. So then I would take on that role of being the rebellious one,
Yeah.
which, her little group had books about how to, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of the book, and it was really demeaning. It's something about how to deal with or how to tame the rebellious spirit, or I don't know. It even as a kid, I was like, "Ooh, that
Yeah.
sounds like, you know, we're just gonna crush the questions, crush the individuality, and there's just no room for discussion." But
Right.
yeah, so it felt very unhealthy, and I think that's why, as much as possible, I would just escape to my
Mhm.
grandparents' house where I could just be outside, and then I didn't have to worry about anything.
Yeah. And when you were 15 and had graduated high school, were getting your GED, did you still feel like the rebellious child, or did you feel like you were getting more independence, more freedom then?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't think I've really looked at it from that perspective. I do think reactionary was a lot of how I operated in the world at that time,
Mhm.
on almost like the just desperate attempt to find some way out, to find some happier place, some better way of being, who are my people? I'm one of those
Yeah.
kids that truly believed that someone had made a mistake at the hospital.
Yeah.
I ended up with the wrong family. So,
How
oh
did you
gosh.
stay motivated, and I guess how did you maintain your mental health going through that time? And sort of what advice would you give for another kid who may be experiencing something similar?
Oh gosh. Listen to your heart. Really, ask yourself. questions. Don't look outside of yourself for all of the answers, because that's what I did. It was
Mhm.
almost like a frenzy. I was here, I
Mhm.
was there, I was everywhere, I was trying everything out because, I just I was never taught to think for myself. The
Mhm.
kind of what we kids lived by was, if you were asked what your opinion was, you were given it right in the same breath. So
Mhm.
kids aren't smart enough to make decisions, and they didn't teach us how to be smart enough to make decisions either. So there was a lot of parenting that we had to do for ourselves. And
Yeah.
that was a steep learning curve. So I would encourage anyone that feels trapped in their life to really create a strong relationship with themselves. Just start talking to themselves. What do I really want here? How do I really want the situation to be? And there was nothing wrong with the experimenting and going around and like trying. I was a workaholic even as a kid. I started my
Mhm.
first full-time job, I was 13 years old, and before that I had babysat, and I just couldn't get enough of getting away and then
Mhm.
trying to earn a living so that I could like really escape.
Yeah.
And so I really channeled a lot of my energy into that. I wasn't a drinker. I didn't do any drugs or any of that kind of thing. In fact, I didn't even really break curfew. I think I did twice. And the way I did it is I stayed over at a friend's house on a Friday or Saturday night or something, and then we went out. But other than that, I never snuck out of my parents' house. Um, so really, I was, by all accounts, I wasn't really a bad kid. I worked, I brought in my money, I paid for my own car, I paid for my own insurance, all of my stuff I paid for.
Mhm.
So, um, live your life, live fully. If you feel led to do something else, don't let someone come in and say, "Oh, well, you shouldn't do that and you shouldn't do this." Give it some thought, find out if that is true for you, but don't take someone else's opinion as fact.
Mhm. And do
Yeah.
you think that came to you naturally to just sort of question as opposed to blindly follow, so you're able to resist and sort of find a different path for yourself?
Yeah. I think that was something I was born with to help save myself, really.
Yeah.
Kind of a coping mechanism, I guess,
And did
ingrained.
you have siblings, or do you have siblings?
Yeah, I'm the oldest of 7 kids.
Okay, okay. What was
Yeah.
that like with your siblings? And did they feel the same way as you did?
Oh, they were treated quite a bit differently than I was. Yeah.
Is
Um,
that just because you were the oldest?
mm, yeah. I mean, to give you any indication, when I had my daughter, I asked my mom if she wouldn't mind helping me out while I was working and helping taking care of Holly, and I would pay her and whatnot. And
Mhm.
her comment was, "Yeah, I'll do everything that I can to make up for the mistakes I made with you so I can do better. It's like I have a second chance now." And I was like, I'm not really sure how to take that. Do you recognize that we were so deeply disconnected? I mean, she's my mom by name, and that's it. Just because I respect the fact that she would be beyond offended if I called her by her first name.
Yeah.
Uh, Other than that, I wouldn't even say that we're friends.
And
There's really nothing.
do you have a relationship with your siblings at all?
Kind of. They're very disconnected individuals as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So they sort of got out of that indoctrination really through the cult education, would you say?
Yeah, she was starting to phase out of that and realizing some of the hangups. And then I think that
Mm.
eventually that particular religious leader fell out of people's good graces because he had been caught doing some stuff.
Mhm.
And,
Tends
you
to
know, of course,
happen.
yeah. Unfortunately, it does. We're all human, and when we start building ourselves up as something holier than thou, and then we fall, it's makes a bigger boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you became an adult and were you said you have a daughter and
Mhm.
were kind of have really grown out of being parented and you've been your own parent for so long. How were you able to cope with the world and kind of being an adult in this world when you are having to rebel or resist against a lot of different powers? And finally, when you're able to have your own space, your own things going on, what was that like for you? Were you able to take off that kind of reactionary hat and like that need to be independent and kind of protect yourself really from things that weren't right for you?
Not entirely, no. I mean, it has been a long journey to the awareness and, like, the full awareness, and I still
Mm,
feel like I'll learn new stuff every day, and it will be like one more layer gets to fall off.
mm-hmm.
The other thing was just the acceptance. Just, you know, my mom would never intentionally do anything nasty, I don't believe.
Mm,
I mean, even if she's upset about something, she actually believes that what she's doing or how she interacts with other people is the right way to be. And it just goes to show, just to reaffirm that hurt people. And she's a
yeah.
hurting person. So she doesn't have the ability to have healthy relationships, unfortunately.
And how did that compassion develop for you?
Ooh, it's wasn't easy, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing was when I just decided to accept her as
Mm,
herself, and I didn't worry about having a mom anymore. I was just like, "You know what? Hey, that's okay. I'll be my own mom." I had some really amazing ladies that came into my life, including my granny,
mm,
and so I really did have some feminine relationships that were nurturing, and I'm gonna be grateful for those, and I'm not gonna worry about the labels. I'm not gonna get consumed with this need to have the perfect mom and the perfect dad and the perfect house and the perfect life. I just am not gonna put myself into that place because there's so much pain there. I mean, who said that our parents have to be one way or
mhm.
that our life has to look a certain way for life to be good? No. I choose. I choose that.
Yeah.
So
So
that
it
was
sounds
where
like
the freedom
forgiveness.
came. Hmm?
Yeah. There's like it sounds like forgiveness and you got freedom from forgiving,
Well, I didn't really feel like I had to forgive anything.
just accepting really that it had happened and they were different from you and
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. I mean, forgiving to me, I'm pretty opinionated actually about the whole idea of forgiving. I don't think we need to
mm,
do it at all. I think it's one of those things where it's sort of a self-soothing type thing, or it's something that people will hold over your head. I've seen him both it used both ways. And
mhm,
once I just got into this place of full acceptance, I accept me as I am and I accept them as they are. And if I'm allowed to show up in this world however I am at whatever stage of growth I'm in, then they get the equal opportunity to express themselves. So I in order for me to walk the talk, I have to allow them to do their thing. Now, they don't need to do it necessarily in my space. I
Mhm.
can decide what goes on there, but I'm certainly not going to have ill feelings or ill will against where they are on their journey.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like a lot of people say that like forgiveness can you don't do it for the other person, you do it for yourself. And
Mhm.
for you, it's been a process of acceptance and moving on, but and still being able to maintain the relationship, no, just coming from this place of understanding.
Yeah, yeah. Really, I mean, they're just other people. They don't owe me
Yeah,
anything special, and so, I just treat my mom and my siblings just like I would anybody else. "How are you doing?"
yeah,
We know each other, and I just look at it as we're acquainted, and that's it.
yeah. How do you think it's affected your parenting now, growing up in a homeschool and with more of a cult mentality?
Yeah. I was 100% for public school.
Yeah.
So my kiddo went to school for a while until, she had a few roadblocks, and it started to cause some really serious repercussions. So, at that point, we tried a couple different schools, and then we went ahead and tried the homeschooling, and that was, just pre-COVID. So then being at home was the thing, and we were already prepared, so that was nice. And I think the biggest thing was because I'd been in public school, I'd had that experience. Then going all through the universities and various colleges, homeschooling, all of that experience really helped me understand where our education system is lacking in
Mhm.
helping students develop life skills. So we concentrate on a fairly broad spectrum. Math, absolutely 100%, that has to happen.
Mhm.
And then there's, what other life skills do we need? English, grammar, science, chemistry, all of those things. But then we also include finance
Mm.
and talk about money and talk about critical thinking and presenting an argument and a debate. So, and I do it in such a way where it's very applicable to the situation so that there's kind of like
Mhm.
skin in the game. So, for
Yeah.
instance, my daughter will want something, and I'll be like, okay, all right, great. So, in the early days before she got acquainted with some of these skills, I would say, go ahead and do your research, look at all the reviews. If you can find people that are talking about it on Google and on YouTube, then go ahead and take a look at those. And then give me 3 reasons why this will make your life better.
Mhm.
And if there's 3 reasons why it might detract or distract you from other things that you feel are more important, then we need to talk about that too. Because having your priorities in your daily life clear will help you know how to make decisions in the future. Is this a good investment or not? And
Yeah.
so that's how we started figuring things out, what she wanted, what would work for her. And so now she'll come to me and she'll be like, "So I sent you some videos. This is the thing that I want, and this is how it's going to make things better. These are the things that I'm lacking in the other program that I'm using, for instance, when she got her new drawing program. And
Cool.
so I want to go this direction in my art, and this will help me. This is the most cost effective. It gives me the most things that I want. I tried the other ones out. I don't like them. They're not as smooth of an interface. I mean, like all the things. She
Yeah.
really is so great at that negotiation, and it's been fun. It's been really fun. I never
I'm
thought parenting would be fun.
I'm so glad you said critical thinking because I grew up in public school and that is not something I learned until college. Like being
Yeah.
able to make an argument and to debate without it being without just blindly answering a question or answering a question that has a clear answer, but like being able to critically assess, research, and and actually like maybe go against what an adult is telling you or understand the world at large in a more critical point of view. So I feel like that's
Mhm.
such an important thing to learn as young as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you left at what did you do after at 15 after like you're already out of college or out of high school? What did you do? Kind of, can you give us a timeline from then to now?
Yeah, I went and I worked in Germany doing construction
Oh, cool.
and came back home, kept working at the horse stables. I'd been working there since I was 13 and just kept plugging along trying to find any job that I could. Worked at Subway. Don't recommend it. I smelled like food every time I left, and I just oh gosh. But it was a great experience. I worked at a couple different video stores. I really, really liked doing that. And I just kept working my way up, any
Mhm.
place that I felt that there was more job opportunities, more advancement opportunities. I remember I was getting interviewed at a car lot. I was going to work out there cleaning their RVs and different things. And the manager, actually, I think he was the department supervisor. And he asked me, he's like, why should I hire you?
Mhm.
Or no, where do you see yourself in the company in like 5 or 10 years or something like that? And I said, in
Mhm.
your seat. And he laughed and he hired me, 18 years old. So, great guy. He was such a pleasure to work with. And then I got married at 19, and that
Tell
was
me about
interesting.
that. Yeah.
Well, I have I have a better understanding of how mental health can really deteriorate a person. My
Mhm.
partner really struggled with so many things. Oh my goodness. And alcohol was one of them. And it it was it was just sad. The whole situation was really a bummer. And I remember I just kind of woke up. I had a clear moment, I guess is what it was. I had a clear moment one day just looking at some stuff, trying to make some decisions, and I just thought, I have absolutely no idea who I am. So how can I even
Mm.
make this decision? And that was really a big indicator of or a turning point in my life as far as I started to be more vocal again and
Mhm.
step up instead of doing things really quietly because just to avoid rocking boats. And I would just show up and I would be whoever people needed me to be. So I always did well everywhere, but I was never myself.
Mm.
And I guess it was starting to take a toll. And I realized that that was true, and I put my foot down on a few things that did not make him very happy. So, um, we ended up getting a divorce. Strangely, it was the strangest situation. He wanted it, but he didn't. He left so many times, and it was really a crash course in relationships because I didn't date until I was 18, and I got married at 19. So And the funny thing is I'm like, "Well, I haven't tried this before, so maybe there's
Yeah.
something to this marriage thing." Don't do that. Well, I guess you can if you really want to. It's pretty easy to get divorced, but it can be very painful. So,
Yeah.
I recommend just not unless you really, 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 really love the person, and marriage for you means something, because I think that you can still have a really beautiful, meaningful relationship without the piece of paper.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
how long had you dated him before you got married?
Oh gosh, 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it transitioned quickly to like a lifelong commitment.
Well, it lasted for 4.5 years. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Has your relationship or has your view on relationships changed now and how you approach them and how you get to know someone?
There for a while, I thought it was true. I got on that bandwagon of you have to know someone at least a year, you have to live together, all of those things. And I still don't find that to be true. So
Mhm.
what was lacking, I believe, is I still didn't know fully who I was, and I didn't know
Mm.
really what I wanted. And I guess maybe because I didn't have the awareness that I even had a choice.
Mhm.
I feel like there was a lot of that there. It was kind of like, if someone is decent, we get along, they have a good job, or they can keep a job. That really was the extent of my criteria, which is terrible. I should have really cared about how they made me feel and how I made
Mm.
them feel, and were we best friends, and all of that kind of thing. And I'd never seen a happy relationship before, ever. I didn't grow up around people who were happily married. They suffered through each day,
Mhm.
or they avoided each other. They stayed together, but you could tell they were miserable.
Mhm.
So,
And yeah,
go ahead.
good. I was gonna say, so that kind of was eye opening for you to realize like it could be something more, and like you could have more than just that baseline.
Yeah. Yeah, it took a while before I I got to that point. I basically just reverted back into working like a crazy person and leaving the country. I joined the military like the day that my divorce was final. I left for Marine Corps boot camp. So,
Oh wow.
yeah, I figured that if I could make it through the hardest boot camp that ever was, then
Mhm.
I could survive anything, and that is what drove me. That's why I chose the Marine Corps. That I didn't know anything about the military really, just the Marine Corps was the best and it was the hardest.
Mhm.
So, if I could survive, then I could survive anything, and that is what kept me going all through boot camp and everything. I'd lay in my rack and stare at the ceiling and just be numb and think, "I'm gonna look back on this and it will be just a memory."
Yeah. Tell me more about your self-discovery and that process, especially through your experience with the Marine Corps. How did you start learning more about yourself, what you're capable of, what you really wanted out of life?
Oh, that's a funny story. I think we'd been in boot camp 2 weeks, and so it was 2 platoons, my platoon and a sister platoon, so there was, like, 150 of us in this squad bay,
Mhm.
and I had stood up to answer a question for our first sergeant, and I had got it wrong. And so she looks at me and she shakes her head, and she says, "Oh, it's gotta be hard to be so tall and so lost." And part of me was freaking out because it's like, "Oh my gosh, there's 152 people or 151, I'm number 2, around me, and they're all staring at me, and then the drill instructors are staring at me, shaking their heads. My company first sergeant is shaking her head. I have just made a huge fool out of myself. But while that was going on, kind of in the background, it felt like the the fog parted, like, seriously, it was like a curtain of fog. I can see it like it was yesterday, and there was a clear view, like, I for the first time, I could actually see clearly, in detail. Stuff
Mm.
wasn't distorted, stuff wasn't all fuzzy and foggy and gray. It There was, like, this really beautiful meadow, and there was a great big tree in front of me, and grass, and the most beautiful blue sky with the sun shining it. It's weird that I can
Mhm.
just all of that happened in, like, a split second,
Mhm.
and I would say that is really when I started to stir. The awakening was kinda happening, but movement started at that
Mm.
point.
And that came from someone recognizing that you were lost.
Yeah, she could see. Oh, I wish I knew. I cannot remember her name. I would love to try to find her and thank her and tell her what an incredible difference that just that one thing did for me.
Yeah. And so what did you start doing after you had that moment of clarity and started seeing things differently?
I was so much more present, like, really in the moment,
Mm.
and that was exciting because I wasn't just going through the motions of life, I was actually living it.
And did you find more moments, or I guess when did you start feeling more like yourself and like you were like, okay, this is me?
Hmm, it was kind of an unraveling, really. It I
Mhm.
would say that I I'd always had that thread, and then it just got more and more clear as more and more of the fog lifted, and then the layers started to come off, and I think I can't say enough about what a good experience the Marine Corps was for me. It
Mhm.
really puts you through the grinder and just breaks you down, but in such a way where I was very conscious of what they were doing. So it didn't bother me. It was like living at home. Really, that's what I would laugh to myself while I'm in boot camp. They do everything they can to upset you. And at one point, I had one drill instructor screaming in one ear and one drill instructor screaming in the other ear. And I'm so tall that they had to stand up on our footlockers so that they could reach my ears.
Oh.
And so I think this is so funny. Of course I can't laugh. So I'm so grateful for all the stuff that I learned as a kid to keep my emotions inside. So I have, like, a totally straight face. They have no idea that they're even getting to me. And I'm just in my
Mhm.
head, I'm thinking, like, I get this. This is their job. It's not a big deal. My God, it's like living at home. I grew up being screamed at
Yeah.
all the time. So for me, boot camp, other than the physical part, because I'd
Mhm.
never done sports or anything, other than working with horses. That was really the gist of it. So learning how to run 3 miles was killer. That was harder than working with the drill instructors. But I'm just so grateful that I had everything behind me that I did that helped me process that because not everyone had that easy of a time. I mean, we had suicide
Mhm. Oh, I bet.
watches and people were getting kicked out because they'd purposely get hurt or they would pretend. We had a couple girls that pretended that they were lesbian so that they would be kicked out. And, at that time in my life, I had really squashed that whole queer nature because I knew how
Mhm.
violently people reacted to it. My first experience
Mhm.
was when I was 10, and so that I put that away, like, far, far, far back in the closet, and I so I was seeing all of these things around me, that were bringing up reminders and
Mhm.
were encouraging me to reflect on who I really was and what was important, and um, just constantly seeing things that would help me along my path to be more who I was. Back then
Yeah,
you could not be gay and be in the military. They
right.
would help you out as quickly as possible. I mean, this girl, they handcuffed her to the bed. Yeah. They really
So she had to sleep
mistreated her.
handcuffed?
Yep. Yeah. She couldn't go to the bathroom when she wanted to. We think we take those kind of things for granted. We just go to the bathroom whenever we want. Well, not in the Marine Corps. You have to ask for permission, and your drill
Mhm.
instructor can tell you no. So, I remember one morning I was helping some girl do her push-ups, or no, her
Mhm.
sit-ups, and I couldn't understand what the smell. I'm like, "Gosh, I keep smelling like poop or something." She had
Mhm.
pooped her pants because they
Oh,
wouldn't let her go. Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
So
I know. It's pretty demoralizing. So you have to be so careful about everything that you do. Everything. Like, plan it all out. How you eat, how much you eat, when your bathroom breaks can be in good standing. Don't make them mad, so that if you
mhm.
really do have to go, that you can. And
Yeah.
got, like, all the things that you're thinking about, it's so survival. So, yeah, it's interesting.
So you're experiencing that and you're learning about yourself, but you aren't able to fully express because it's the Marine Corps and they
Mhm.
want everyone pretty much to be the same.
Yeah.
When did you get out, and were you able to be more of a full expression of the self that you were learning about in boot camp and while you were enlisted?
Mhm. Yeah, free time. I I was able to explore a little bit more, and um I spent a lot of time at university while I was in. I was very fortunate. I had an office that was filled with officers and enlisted that really supported higher education. And so I got to leave early
Cool.
so that I could take courses. So that was instrumental. Plus, I spent a lot of time at the library, and I had a lot of downtime in between. Well, not a lot of downtime. I also babysat at the same time, but I
Mhm.
I would read when I could,
Mhm.
and that was great. And then just, observing people and kind of playing to the edge, like, how much can I be myself without
Mhm.
getting in trouble? And it happened that they were going through this massive transition of bringing in more civilians to do certain administrative positions and things like that. And because I was an accountant, I worked at the general's building. um, that was one of the jobs that they were phasing out. And so I had the option of a few positions that weren't even going to be starting for like 18 months. The school wasn't.
Mhm.
And you don't wanna get caught in limbo like that. It's horrible, horrible. The things that they make you do while you're waiting for a job. You're just kinda like a grunt. You can go pick up poop for all they care, and sometimes that's what you
Yeah.
have to do. So I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't think so. That doesn't really sound like fun. What are my other options?" And, the liaison was like, "Oh, well, we'll just send you to university. You can just go to college." And I said, "Ah, great. Where do I
Oh,
sign?" Yeah, yeah. It really was a very easy transition. I 100% believe that the universe was with me this whole time. Like, they knew
yeah.
that my time was done, that I had gotten what I needed to, and so, moving on. Yeah, so I
That's
got full
amazing.
honors.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I'm so, so grateful, and I couldn't shout out a bigger thanks to all of the people in my office, they were so great. They were so supportive, and I hear horror stories from people all the time, and I just didn't have that experience at all. It was like I finally found a
That's
group of
awesome.
people that I could resonate with. So I
Hmm.
I was grateful for my time there.
That's really cool. And
Mhm.
obviously, we've connected through the life coaching school,
Yeah,
and I coach authenticity and authentic self expression. I'm really curious about mentioned like a queer identity and kind of being more comfortable exploring your own identity. What was that process like for you? And is that something that you've worked on through life coaching therapy? Like, could you share more about that?
sure. Yeah. I didn't have any therapy around that. I had already accepted the fact that in order to really pursue my number one priority, which was a career that I loved and a very big bank
Hmm.
account, that
Yeah.
being out and proud would get in my way. And because I hadn't seen any relationships that were worth fighting for, to
Hmm.
me, that was like the last thing that I wanted to give attention to.
Hmm.
And then I met someone, and it was quite a bit later, but that got me thinking. And then at a certain point, I'd done all the other stuff and I'd achieved
Hmm.
those goals and had all my toys, and just I still found that there was something missing in my life. So that led me back to the realization that what was really missing was all of me, because I was only
Mm.
living life part of me. So that was interesting. Just that realization alone, and uh, she is no longer with us.
Oh,
And
sorry.
I miss her every day. And I'm just very grateful that
Yeah.
we had that time. And I also think that I've learned over the years that true authenticity is that you can be whoever at any moment. You don't have to label yourself, you don't have to be in a box.
Hmm.
And I found that in my deep quest for community, which is kind of where, in relationships, once I
Hmm.
realized that the career and the money wasn't all that there was to life, I find that in our search for meaning, sometimes we think that we have to label ourselves so that we can
Hmm.
belong somewhere, instead of just knowing that we belong because we're human and they're
Hmm.
human, and we can share that. So that's been quite a journey. A whole lot happened in a very short amount of time around that. So um, just love who you love.
Hmm.
That's kind of my philosophy now about that. If you love being around that person and they love being around you, who cares about the semantics?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that that was huge, especially in correlation to just the acceptance of things. So everything's really fit
Hmm.
together quite well, just like a great little Tetris level. Things just fit.
Yeah. And I feel like socially, like the world is becoming more fluid and more
Mhm.
open to talk about the fluidity of gender, relationships, uh, and just like you said, connecting through the humanity of people. Do you find that it is a more welcoming world than the one you grew up in when it comes to identity?
Somewhat, yes. I think we've probably taken 3 steps forward and 1.5 steps back, because there's still a lot of
Mhm.
people who are pretending to be okay with fluidity, and then even people in the queer community get really upset about what it means to be fluid. I mean, I've had some people
Mhm.
really lose their stuff when I said something about being fluid. And so the I know that there's been damage done. I know people have been hurt. I know that words have been used in a way that were not compassionate, and
Mhm.
that even within our community, I'm sorry to say, there have been people who have used some of these terms and these new ways of being to manipulate people. So there's trauma from that. And
Mhm.
it's just like anything else, there's room for improvement. And if we can just get away from all of the labels and all of the
Yeah.
shoulds and just get back to the human element, like you were saying, and just come from that place,
Yeah.
we're going to be able to foster more health overall, well-being overall.
Right. And yeah, like you said, 3 steps forward and 1.5 steps back. It's like the more we learn, the more space there is for things to be divisive and for people to
Mhm.
take sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah, and I will say that it doesn't help the situation when people try to force feed others
Mhm.
who are taking it a little slower. We wanna honor everyone's learning style, really, and
Mhm.
not everyone can change gears as quickly, especially when our country here in the US, we are deeply indoctrinated by Christian views of the queer community being an abomination to God. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of re-education that has to happen, and there are shows that have done a really beautiful job of that and have even approached it from a very light-hearted place where that information is being corrected. It's kind of like what I was
Right.
saying about Thanksgiving and the truth about the pilgrims and
Mhm.
the First Nation. It's not always the way that it's presented. And when the truth does come out, it can be very hard for people to assimilate that.
Right.
So,
It requires adjustment and patience from both sides.
yeah, and some compassion for
Mm.
sure.
What would you say for people listening who are in the boat where they want to understand, they want to be open to allowing people to feel safe in their identity and to feel welcomed in society, but at the same time don't want to be force fed? Like, do you have ideas or a vision for what that would look like?
So, like a message to the people who just need some space. Well, I would just say take your space and um you know those those people I don't really have the message for necessarily. My message would be more for the people that feel the need to go to the extremes. I would ask
Mhm.
them to show more compassion and have a conversation. If you see someone who looks like they're resisting, if you're not in harm's way, then ask them, because that could be that person who really is okay with things, but it doesn't like the approach that's being taken. So how can
Right.
we have a, a conversation where both sides are feeling equally heard and valid and validated?
Yeah.
So I recommend conversations, open conversations. If people feel heated or like they're being attacked, then you need to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what got you, just to pivot a little bit, but still in
Mhm,
this conversation, because I like the way you're like giving guidance, what got
mhm.
you into life coaching?
Oh, me and my own problems, really. Um, I that was the kind of, official thing, I guess. I kept having experiences where I found myself in that role. Even as I had started my interior design business, I was coaching people on money confidence and trusting
Mm,
themselves. And I finally just took a moment and I'm like, you know what? This really, this really could be something. And I think this is really where I might be led, my next checkpoint maybe.
mhm.
So, and I thought, gosh, I'm gonna learn so much. That's what I found when I
Yeah,
went and got certified for, my yoga instructor training. I did it so that I could do yoga better and so that I could make a
right.
business out of it. So everything kind of has an entrepreneurial side. Is there something
Mhm.
here? So, yeah, I could see so much benefit, and I realized that there's a lot of people that were like me that didn't have the support as children or even into adulthood so that they could make a healthy decision and actually trust who they are,
Yeah,
and that being them was a beautiful thing. So, yeah, it just really hit the heartstrings just right, and I
yeah,
dived right in.
that's awesome. And based on your experiences, kind of like the sum of all experiences, what do you think the world has in common?
We're all human. We're all worthwhile. There's more than enough. This is a prosperous experience.
Mhm.
We're so powerful and we don't even know it.
Yep.
So we can come together pretty much on every level, just celebrating our diversities, celebrating our similarities. There is no reason for us to hate. None at all. It's
Right.
all made up crap.
And so we have this shared ability to accept one another and come together. That like collective consciousness, I think, is like something that's could be so powerful.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, I would love to see it in our lifetime, but I'm not going to hold my breath, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath. Keep hoping though. Keep letting
Yeah.
that be front and center because I they say that it's is it 4.2 or 3.8% of a population can affect the change that you wanna see,
Okay.
and that's a pretty small amount when you think about it, even though we have billions of people here, that's a teeny
Mhm.
tiny portion. So the more of us that can put that out into the universe, and we are seeing it. We're seeing it a lot more. I mean, why do you think that there's so much more inclusion and so much more talk of
Mhm.
equality? We're getting there. Now it's not happening quite at the rate that it could, but we are getting
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. And like if everything does happen for a reason, maybe the way things are unfolding need to happen the way they are. Like the three steps forward, one step back. It's like a dance that we do
Yeah,
to get to where we're meant to be.
yeah, definitely.
That's beautiful. Okay, Vanessa, any final words of wisdom that you have for anyone that's listening that's maybe experienced um, maybe a sheltered life or some early conditioning or is wanting to work more with self expression and authentic identity?
Mm. Yeah, get to know yourself. That is the best relationship you will ever have.
Hmm.
So do that, and everything else will become clear.
Yep. Love it. Thank you so much. All right. That's the end of our interview. So thank you, Vanessa, for joining us. Thanks for sharing your story and for being vulnerable. Yeah, it's been great.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you. And I'm sending lots of good vibes and cheers to everyone listening.
Thank you for joining us today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and join us in our next conversation where we'll be exploring the extraordinary lives of ordinary people. I'm Courtney Lofton, and this is Ordinary Eccentrics.